Authors Over 50, Writing in Life's Sweetest Third. Authors Over 50's weekly podcast celebrates writers and their journeys to publication. Writing after 50 is a whole story on its own, so let's skip to life's sweetest third and talk with authors about their journey from pen to publish. Welcome. I'm Julia Daly, your host, and I invite you to listen to interviews with writers who've achieved their goal of publishing a book just later in life. We've seen award lists for under 30 or under 40, but I've yet to see lists for those who've achieved a significant milestone of their own, launching a new career and publishing their first book after the age of 50. We will hear about these authors' inspirations, struggles, strategies, and the smell of that first book. These writers' journeys inspire me because I'm one of them. My guest today is an author, editor, and storyteller, dedicated to helping writers bring their stories to the page, stage, and screen. She serves as Director of Operations for the San Diego Writers Festival and sits on the board of the literary nonprofit So Say We All. She regularly performs in narrative nonfiction showcases, and her work has appeared in the San Diego Decameron Project, the Literary Vine Review, and Shaking the Tree, Brazen short memoir. She lives in San Diego with her husband and their empty nest rescue dog, Charlie. Blurred Fates is her first novel. Welcome to Authors Over 50, Anastasia Zadeik.
So great to be here.
Anastasia, our opening question on Authors Over 50 is always, so what took you so long to write a book?
So what took me so long? Well, I think like many of the writers that you probably feature on Writers Over 50, writing is actually probably my third kind of career. After college, I worked in neuropsych research for a little over a decade in the field of studying memory disorders, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, frontotemporal dementia, and then also just how memories are formed and how they're misremembered and how they're lost, and whether there's tools that we can use to help preserve memory as people get older. So that was my first career. My second career was as a full-time mom and full-time volunteer. I was, the PA, but president of the every single sports team mom I think you can possibly be. And then I volunteered with some organizations, and that led to my third career, which was in the writing community. And I began to write probably in earnest about 9 or 10 years ago. I took a couple of classes and started writing. I'd always kept journals and things like that, but I'd never written anything that was something. I was just writing for my own, sort of a way to capture what was going on in my life, process what was going on in my life, and record it for whoever might be interested in it later. But then I'd say, about 9 or 10 years ago, I started taking some classes with the intention of writing something. And I started with short fiction, and then I started working on this novel, I would say pretty shortly thereafter. And it was my first book, and I put it aside for a very long period of time. I put it aside for about a year, and then I tried to get an agent with the traditional method, except I was not very good at it, in that you're supposed to mail out a query letter to dozens of people. And I would mail it out to 1 or 2, and then I would wait for them to write me back. And then if they asked for a partial or a whole manuscript, I would send it off to them, and then I'd wait again. And so it was a very slow process. And I got discouraged way too early because of the fact that I was doing it wrong, I'm sure. But, and then put the book aside again. And it wasn't until about 4 or 5 years ago, I was in a writer's conference, and I read part of it and aloud, and was encouraged by the people in the class that I should pull it out again. And so I did. And in the meantime, I had written another book, which will be coming out after this one. And so when I went back to this, I realized that it wasn't as bad as I thought it was, and kind of worked on it again. Worked with a couple of different editors, a developmental editor that sent me 8 pages of single-spaced notes, and put all of those into play, and then gave it to some beta readers, and now it is a finished manuscript. So it took me a while, but really had to hold it in my hands and realize that it's a real thing. So it's exciting, and I think it is exciting to be doing it later in life. I'm not sure that I could have done it when I was younger. So
after you queried for those agents, did you end up with a hybrid, a small press, or did you self-publish your book?
I ended up with a hybrid. I chose to go with She Writes Press for a couple of reasons. One, because it's all women. I went to an all-women's college, Smith College on the East Coast, and I'm passionate about women supporting women and women working with women. And also, She Writes had a history. This is their 10th year in this space, and they do all of the distribution through traditional distribution, which is great for an author like me to know that part is being taken care of by someone else. So they help with the cover design, the interior design, all of the metadata. They take care of all of that. So while we do have to do a lot of our own promotion, I think that that's pretty common now, even with the big 5 publishing companies. So that doesn't feel that onerous in a sense of, or unusual. So, and I've been very happy with them. It's been a fairly smooth process. I mean, I've learned a lot, and I think any first-time author would probably say that it's a learning process every step of the way. There's something new, and terminology and the way things work and the timing, I think, was a big surprise. So yeah, but I've been very happy with She Writes.
Will you stay with She Writes for your second book?
Intend to. I'm on the tentative schedule to have that one come out next fall, so 2023. So,
well, what was your inspiration? How did you determine the plot for your book?
So Blurred Fates started out as sort of an exploration for me of the nature and nurture debate. As a psych major, that's something that always fascinated me. How is it that we become who we are? Is it something that is determined by our DNA or by our upbringing or our environment or some combination of all of those things? And I started to think about the fact that in almost every community, there are people that you see that you believe have this perfect life. And it looks like everything that they do is that they have a Midas touch almost. But I also realized that everybody has painful things that they're dealing with in their life. In my own life, when I started, just about the time I started writing this book, my mother had early onset Alzheimer's disease. And my stepdaughter had come to live with us as a teenager, and her mom was struggling with mental illness and bipolar disorder and drug addiction. And on the surface, it looked to most people like my life was pretty nice, and it was, but I had my own stuff that I was dealing with. And the more I talked to other people about what I was going through, I realized that the vast majority of people I spoke with had their own struggles. And back in the early 2000s, and even up until about the last 10 years from then, 2010, 2011, people weren't talking about it as openly as they do now. And it struck me that most people wanted to know that they weren't alone in facing these struggles. And so the inspiration for this book came from the idea of exploring a woman whose seemingly perfect life starts to unravel, and for reasons that she can't explain to anyone, because she's fearful that if she tells people about her past, that they will no longer love her. But if she doesn't tell them, if she holds it inside, it's destroying her as well. So she becomes sort of trapped by this, like I call it, trapped by the unspoken. And as her life starts to fall apart, and her marriage is falling apart, she turns to her husband's best friend, who's the guy that introduced the two of them. And he becomes sort of her best form of support as she's trying to figure out the next step of her life. And then her brother calls and she has to go home because her dad is dying. And so he ends up going back with her, and the past starts to, as I say, invade the present, and the relationships all get very complicated, and she ends up having to face the truth about her past. So that's more or less what it's about. And I think that based on what I've heard from a lot of people, even though the things that happen to her are unique, there are universal themes that seem to be touching other people's personal experiences.
And as an adopted child, I am very interested in that nature versus nurture question. So I'm always interested in hearing more about that.
Back when I was in school, in the 80s, there were a lot, I think there was a lot more of the either or. And I think that right now, most people come to accept that it's a combination of, because some people who have, if you look at their family history, you might think that they're doomed because there's so many issues that they're facing from a genetic standpoint, but they turn out to be very strong, resilient people. And there's other people who have nothing that you would look to or point to in their genetic past, but they are struggling with life, perhaps because of their experiences and who knows. But it's not always, it's very an individual thing, I think, for every single person.
I think you're right. It's a very interesting and complex topic.
Mm-hmm.
Are you writing full time now, or do you still have a day job?
So I am what I call a permanent volunteer. I mentioned in the introduction, I serve as the director of operations for the San Diego Writers Festival, which was started about 4 years ago in San Diego to provide quality literary programming to the whole community free of charge.
Well, that's very nice. San Diego has a lot of wonderful attributes, and not just the weather. Why don't you read a few paragraphs for us so that we can hear your tone and voice in the book?
So I'm going to be reading from the prologue, very beginning of the book. I have no childhood snapshots. No picture of an infant Catherine swathed in a pink hospital blanket, head still misshapen from her descent down the birth canal. No picture of 1-year-old Katie clutching her favorite stuffed animal. No awkward school photos with Peter Pan collars, pigtails. No baby books, scrapbooks, or yearbooks. Other than a slightly worn copy of Beatrix Potter's The Tale of Peter Rabbit, acquired at age 17, and a dog-eared copy of William Faulkner's The Sound and the Fury, acquired at age 9, I have nothing tangible from my childhood. The remarkable thing is that while I have no pictures of my brother, Daniel, and I never see his face in my dreams, stormy slate blue eyes that remind me of the sky before it opens with rain, curly, dirty blonde hair framing a chiseled face, a perpetual shadow of a beard, his broad mouth, lips taut in a permanent sneer. He is frozen for me at age 19, cynicism and evil wrapped in shorts and a Grateful Dead t-shirt. It is this version of him that randomly appears across the street at a busy intersection, in the window of a passing car as I park at the grocery store, or in my rearview mirror as I drive home or to the kids' school for pickup. Rationally, I know it cannot be him. He would be nearly 40 by now, his appearance dulled by age and ravaged by his life choices. Yet when I see, or imagine I see, his 19-year-old face, my heart races, sweat forms, my foot presses on the gas, my vision blurs, and I forget for a moment where I am. I drive past my destination, hoping to lose him. Then, as quickly as he appeared, he is gone. I focus on breathing in and out, cycling the mantra, be here, not there. I tell myself that a mentally unstable, drug-abusing drifter is unlikely to persist in efforts to find me. Nevertheless, Daniel holds the power of the past, And over the years, with an intuitive sense of terrifying unpredictability, he has reminded me to be afraid of him, of what he knows, of who I might become.
Oh, that was lovely. Thank you. Our listeners love to hear authors read their own work. I think that's so important for us to hear. And I've been told by our listeners that they choose their next read depending on how the author enticed them. So thank you for that.
Oh, good.
Was there anything that you edited out of the book after you began your editing process?
So there's two major things that changed during the editing process, I would say. One is that my first version, I wrote each chapter almost like its own little story with a beginning, a middle, and the end. And in between the first and the second draft, I went to a writer's conference, and the keynote speaker was talking about the necessity to keep your reader engaged and to keep them turning the page between chapters. And one of the things she said was, you need to have not necessarily a cliffhanger, but you need to have some sense of a question or something unresolved that keeps your reader interested. And so the endings of many of the chapters to be a little more open-ended. And as I was doing that, it sort of became a little bit more of a mystery. The rewrite forced me to leave some things not tied up. And so I think that helped it become what it eventually, now it is being described by many of my readers as a psychological thriller. And I think that's one of the main reasons was that sense of lack of resolution from chapter to chapter. The other major thing is that the ending changed. There's I don't want to give it away, but as part of one of the final twists, there was an explanation of the twist that I took out of the book because I was told that it was a little too dark. So I changed the ending slightly to make it a little less dark. And those were probably the two biggest changes that I made to the manuscript.
I remember removing a dark place in my book as well. The editor didn't like that entire chapter, so I had to pull the entire chapter.
Oh my gosh.
Yes.
Did you have to put something else in its place, or did you?
Well, it was about the protagonist's husband, and he was president of the United States, and I was trying to make him a little dark, and the editor said, we don't want her married to a dark man like that. So I guess we have to listen to our readers and editors sometimes.
Yeah, there are these fine lines. I think people want to see all of the facets of human personalities, but you have to make it something that's palatable at the same time for your readers. So gotta listen.
Yeah.
Can't please everyone though.
No, we cannot. Mm-hmm. You mentioned marketing, and I know that She Writes has programs for that. Have you found anything that you feel like worked, or maybe something that didn't work that you would tell our listeners about?
So I'm my book doesn't come out until August 2nd. So I'm in sort of that pre-release publicity stage. I do have a publicist who I love. Her name is Caitlin Hamilton Summy. She's from North Carolina. And we hit it off because we both went to the same college, which I think helped us to just feel an instant connection. And she has been instrumental in helping me to sort of get my name out there. I think that's the biggest part of the publicity push, is to just let people know you're there. When you look at the numbers of books that are coming out in any given year, it's a daunting number. It's just so how do you get people to know that your book is even there? I think that's the biggest challenge that I'm currently facing. So I'm working on writing a few articles, putting some things out on online magazines, and I have one coming out on LitHub in July, I think. And I also I participated in an event through the ALA, the American Library Association, which was a lot of fun. It was with two other authors, and we presented did basically like a PowerPoint presentation about our books to a number of librarians. I think there was like 150 or so librarians on the Zoom webinar. And so we were able to present it directly to them. And that was a very interesting, then there was a panel discussion at the end. It was just a very interesting experience to be part of that.
Anastasia, what do you think was the best money you've ever spent as a writer?
Oh my, that's an excellent question. Best money I spent. I would have to say the best money I spent was I took a class right before I started to write something instead of just writing. I took a read and critique class at UCSD Extension, which is the evening program. My instructor was a woman by the name of Marnie Friedman, and she was hands down the best writing teacher I've ever found. And she ended up becoming my writing coach. And then from there, becoming someone that I work with. She's one of the founders of the San Diego Writers Festival, and she pulled me into that. And we've become incredibly close friends, but she continues to be my writing coach and the person who has inspired me from the get-go to believe in myself. She pushes you through every time you hit that wall. She's there to pick you up, dust you off, get you back on track. And she has a counseling background, which I think is from emotional support for authors, but also understanding a lot of psychological aspects of novels. But she helped me tremendously with my book. And in the early stages was the person who would say, you know, what's the next thing that you think the reader is going to want to have happen? So I would say taking her class was by far the best money I've ever spent, and getting the chance to meet her and work with her.
I think that's so important. I became hooked on online classes when we were in the pandemic. And I love writers' retreats and conferences and being around other writers. So I think that's, so vital to our writing careers.
I'm a huge believer in the power of writing to build community and the power of community to build writers. I think that they're integrally important to each other. And that old statement, it takes a village. I think that's true for books and poetry. And the more support we have for each other, it's a pretty lonely existence, writing. And if you just sit by yourself, it can be quite isolating.
What about advice for writers 50 and above?
My advice to writers 50 and above would be embrace where you are in your life. We as a society have become so focused on recognizing brilliance in the young, and that is, we should continue to do that. Don't get me wrong. I have 2 young adult children, and I marvel at the things they're accomplishing in their lives at such young ages. But I think it's writers over 50, we've lived lives. So we have that old experience, write what you know. There's more that we know. There's more that we've seen, that we've felt, that we've struggled through and come out on the other side of. And we should embrace all of that. And I think it gives authenticity to our work. And so that's what I would encourage them to do, is to view it as much of an accomplishment to write at 50 as it is at 30 and or at 70. I have a friend who's just publishing her first book, and she's 86. And I think it's fantastic. She has lived such an incredible life, and for her to share that with others, I think is just a wonderful gift. So
I totally agree. I think it's a gift for us to be able to write, and we still have so much to say, and we have the wisdom that you mentioned. And so I think there are many of us who want to continue writing the rest of our lives. So we appreciate you so much, Anastasia, for being with us today. And we're excited that you're now one of our authors over 50.
I appreciate what you're doing. And I think it's great to be building these online communities of fellow writers over 50. So thank you for your program, and thank you for having me on.
Thank you for joining us today. Please look for Authors Over 50 every Thursday, when we will have conversations with accomplished debut novelists over the age of 50. Please subscribe and share with a friend. And check out my own publication journey after 50 at www.juliadaily, that's D-A-I-L-Y, like dailynewspaper.com. Until next time, keep reading and writing. And remember, it's never too late to fulfill a dream in life's sweetest third.